Maya Rodriguez stepped off the city bus, pulling her jacket tighter around her shoulders. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the sidewalk as she made her way toward the government building. Today was important. After months of paperwork and waiting, she was finally going to receive her disability benefits approval in person. At 24, Maya looked older than her years. The left side of her face bore the unmistakable marks of severe burns. The scars ran from her temple down to her jaw, creating a patchwork of healed skin that had never quite returned to its original form. Her left arm, visible when she pushed up her sleeves, showed similar damage. The scars were old now, nearly 3 years healed, but they still drew stares wherever she went. Maya had learned to live with the looks. Some people tried to be polite about it, stealing quick glances when they thought she wasn't watching. Others weren't so subtle. Children pointed until their parents hurriedly pulled their hands down. Teenagers sometimes whispered to each other and laughed. Adults often looked away quickly, as if her scars might be contagious. She entered the government building and found her way to the waiting area. The space was filled with plastic chairs arranged in neat rows, and a few dozen people sat scattered throughout, each waiting for their turn with various government services. Maya took a seat in the back row, hoping to avoid unnecessary attention. The woman sitting 2 seats away from her was middle-aged with perfectly styled hair and expensive clothes. She glanced at Maya and immediately shifted uncomfortably in her chair. Maya noticed but kept her eyes focused on the paperwork in her hands. "Number 47, called a voice from behind the service counter. Maya checked her ticket. She was number 52. 5 more people to go. A man in his 30s sat down in the chair directly across from her. He wore a business suit and was typing rapidly on his phone. When he looked up and saw Maya's face, his expression changed immediately. He stared openly for several seconds before leaning over to whisper something to the woman next to him. Maya had developed thick skin over the past 3 years, but moments like this still stung. She remembered when she had been like these people, unmarked by tragedy, moving through the world without carrying visible proof of trauma. That felt like a lifetime ago. The woman with the styled hair was now looking at Maya with a mixture of disgust and curiosity. She leaned toward the businessman and whispered, "What do you think happened to her? Probably a drug lab explosion or something." Maya's jaw tightened. She had heard variations of this speculation many times before. People always assumed the worst when they saw her scars. They imagined she must have been involved in something illegal or dangerous by choice. The truth was far different, but she had learned that explaining rarely helped. "Number 48, called the voice again. A teenage girl sitting near the front of the room turned around to get a better look at Maya. When she saw the scars, she immediately pulled out her phone and appeared to be taking a picture. Maya stood up quickly and moved to a different seat, this time choosing one where her back was to most of the room. The businessman was still watching her. "I bet she was in a meth lab," he said to his companion, not bothering to lower his voice much. "That's what usually causes burns like that. Probably lucky to be alive, honestly." Maya closed her eyes and took a deep breath. She thought about the therapist she had seen for 8 months after the incident. Dr. Williams had taught her breathing exercises for moments exactly like this. In through the nose, hold for 4 counts, out through the mouth. She repeated the pattern 3 times. When she opened her eyes, a different woman had sat down nearby. This one was younger, maybe early 20s, with bright purple hair and multiple piercings. Unlike the others, she didn't stare at Maya's scars or whisper to anyone about them. Instead, she offered a genuine smile. "I like your jacket," the young woman said quietly. "That color green really suits you." Maya looked down at her olive-green military surplus jacket. It was one of her favorites, both for its comfort and because the color reminded her of better times. "Thank you," she replied softly. "I'm Zoe," the young woman said. "I'm here trying to sort out some paperwork for my mom's Social Security. Government stuff is always such a hassle, isn't it?" Maya nodded. "I'm Maya, and yes, it definitely is." For the first time all day, Maya felt herself relaxing slightly. Zoe's easy conversation and lack of judgment was refreshing after the stares and whispers from the others. Number 49. The businessman got up and walked toward the counter. As he passed Maya's chair, he made sure to look at her scars one more time and shook his head with obvious disapproval. "Don't mind him," Zoe said quietly. "Some people just don't know how to mind their own business." Maya appreciated the kindness, but she had learned long ago that defending herself or having others defend her rarely changed anything. People believed what they wanted to believe about her scars, regardless of the truth. The truth was something Maya rarely shared with strangers. It wasn't because she was ashamed of it, exactly, but because it was complicated and painful, and most people weren't genuinely interested in understanding. They preferred their quick judgments and simple explanations. 3 years ago, Maya had been Sergeant Maya Rodriguez, serving her second deployment overseas with the Army's Medical Corps. She had been 21 years old and passionate about helping wounded soldiers. Her unit ran a forward medical station in a region where attacks were common but not expected on that particular day. Maya remembered the morning clearly. It had been unseasonably quiet, which should have been a warning. She was organizing medical supplies in the supply tent when the first rocket-propelled grenade hit their compound. The explosion knocked her to the ground, but she wasn't hurt. Her training kicked in immediately. The second RPG hit the main medical tent where 3 wounded soldiers were being treated. Maya didn't think twice. She ran toward the burning tent, knowing that those soldiers couldn't move themselves to safety. The first soldier she reached was unconscious, but breathing. She managed to drag him to safety before going back for the second. By the time she reached the third soldier, a 19-year-old kid from Ohio named Danny, the tent was fully engulfed in flames. The support beams were beginning to collapse, and the heat was overwhelming. Maya knew she had maybe 30 seconds before the entire structure came down. Danny was conscious but trapped under a fallen cabinet. Maya tried to lift it alone but couldn't. She looked around desperately for help, but the other members of her unit were dealing with wounded soldiers from the first explosion. There was no time to get assistance. Maya made the choice that would change her life forever. She positioned herself under the burning cabinet and used her body as a lever to create just enough space for Danny to crawl out. The burning debris fell across her left side as Danny escaped, searing through her uniform and into her skin. She remembered the pain being so intense that it was almost surreal, like her body couldn't quite process what was happening. Someone dragged her to safety, but by then the damage was done. She had third-degree burns across 15% of her body. Danny survived. So did the other 2 soldiers she had saved. Maya spent the next 4 months in military hospitals undergoing skin grafts and painful rehabilitation. The physical recovery was difficult, but the emotional adjustment proved even harder. When she was finally discharged from the Army, Maya discovered that returning to civilian life with visible scars was its own kind of challenge. Job interviews became awkward affairs where potential employers clearly struggled with her appearance. Dating was nearly impossible. Simple activities like grocery shopping or going to restaurants required mental preparation for the inevitable stares and comments. "Number 50, called the voice from the counter. Maya checked her ticket again. 2 more to go. The woman with the styled hair was leaving now, having completed her business. As she walked past Maya, she made a point of covering her nose and mouth with her hand, as if Maya might smell bad or be contagious. Maya had encountered this reaction before, too. Some people seemed to believe that visible trauma meant she was somehow dirty or diseased. Zoe noticed the woman's behavior and rolled her eyes. "Seriously? What is wrong with people?" Maya shrugged. She had developed a philosophy over the past 3 years that helped her cope with these interactions. People's reactions to her scars said more about them than they did about her. Their discomfort, their quick judgments, their cruelty, these things revealed their character, not hers. Still, it was exhausting to be constantly reminded that she was different now. Before her injuries, Maya had moved through the world with the confidence that most young people take for granted. She had been attractive in a conventional way, with smooth olive skin and bright eyes. Strangers had smiled at her. Shop clerks had been friendly. Life had been easier in ways she hadn't even realized at the time. Now she was hyper-aware of every social interaction. She had to decide constantly whether to explain her scars or let people assume whatever they wanted. She had to choose between hiding and facing the world's judgment. Some days she felt strong enough to educate people who asked respectful questions. Other days, she just wanted to disappear. Number 51, almost her turn. Maya gathered her paperwork and prepared to stand up. The disability benefits she was here to claim weren't much, but they would help her pay for the ongoing medical treatments she still needed. The skin grafts required regular monitoring, and she had appointments with specialists every few months. Zoe was called up to a different window at the same time. Before leaving, she turned to Maya one more time. "Hey, I know this might sound weird, but you seem really strong. Whatever your story is, I have a feeling you've been through something incredible and come out the other side." That's pretty amazing. Maya was surprised by the comment. Most people saw her scars as a sign of damage or weakness. Zoe was the first stranger in a long time to suggest they might represent something positive. "Thank you," Maya said. "That means more than you know." As Zoe walked away, Maya reflected on how different people's reactions could be. The businessman and the woman with styled hair had seen her scars and immediately assumed the worst about her character and her past. Zoe had looked at the same scars and seen strength and survival. Number 52. Maya stood up and walked toward the counter. The clerk was a tired-looking woman in her 50s who barely glanced up from her computer screen. Maya was grateful for the lack of attention for once. "Documents, please," the clerk said in a monotone voice. Maya handed over her paperwork. As the clerk reviewed it, Maya noticed a small American flag pin on the woman's jacket. It reminded her of the flag patches they had worn on their uniforms overseas. For a moment, she was transported back to that forward medical station, to the morning when everything changed. She wondered sometimes what would have happened if she had made a different choice that day. If she had waited for help before going after Danny, she might have kept her unmarked skin. She might have had an easier time transitioning back to civilian life. She might not be sitting in a government office right now, applying for disability benefits. But Danny might not have survived. And Maya knew she would make the same choice again if faced with the same situation. The scars were painful and life-changing. But they were also proof that she had acted with courage when it mattered most. Not everyone who looked at her could see that, but it didn't make it less true. The clerk finished reviewing her documents and stamped several papers with official seals. "Everything appears to be in order. Your benefits will begin next month." Maya thanked the clerk and gathered her papers. As she left the government building, she felt a mixture of relief and frustration. Relief that the bureaucratic process was finally complete. Frustration that she needed these benefits at all because of how her scars affected her ability to find steady work. The afternoon sun was lower now, creating longer shadows across the parking lot. Maya walked slowly toward the bus stop, lost in thought about the day's interactions and the long journey that had brought her to this point. She didn't notice the black sedan that had been parked across the street since she had arrived. She didn't see the man in military uniform who had been watching the government building for the past hour, waiting for someone specific to emerge. Maya had no idea that her afternoon was about to take a turn that would change everything. General Thomas Mitchell sat in the back seat of the military sedan, reviewing the stack of files on his lap. At 58, he had spent most of his adult life in the Army, rising through the ranks from a young lieutenant to his current position as a two-star general. Today's visit to the regional government office was routine business, checking on veteran services and disability claim processes in the area. His driver, Sergeant First Class Johnson, glanced in the rearview mirror. "Sir, we're about 5 minutes out from the government building." "Thank you, Sergeant," General Mitchell replied, not looking up from his papers. He was reading through case files of veterans who had experienced difficulties with their benefit claims. It was part of a larger review he was conducting to improve the system for wounded warriors transitioning back to civilian life. The cases were heartbreaking. Young men and women who had served their country with honor, only to return home facing bureaucratic nightmares while dealing with physical and psychological wounds. General Mitchell had made it his personal mission to streamline these processes and ensure that veterans received the support they deserved. One file caught his attention. It was marked with several red flags indicating complications and delays. The veteran's name was Rodriguez, Maya, female, age 24, Medical Corps, honorably discharged due to combat injuries. The file showed she had been waiting 8 months for her disability benefits to be approved. General Mitchell frowned. 8 months was far too long for any veteran to wait, especially one who had been injured in the line of duty. He made a note to investigate this case personally during his visit. As they pulled up to the government building, General Mitchell noticed a young woman walking slowly toward the bus stop. Something about her posture caught his attention. She moved with a careful deliberateness that he recognized from years of observing wounded soldiers. It was the way people moved when they were managing chronic pain or physical limitations that weren't immediately obvious to others. "Sergeant, let me out here," General Mitchell said. "I want to walk the last block and observe how veterans are being treated at this facility." Sergeant Johnson pulled over and General Mitchell stepped out of the sedan. He was wearing his dress uniform for the official visit, complete with his ribbons and rank insignia. The uniform always drew attention, which sometimes made it difficult to observe situations naturally, but today he felt it was important to be clearly identified as military leadership. The young woman had stopped at the bus stop and was sitting on the bench, looking through some papers. General Mitchell decided to walk past the stop on his way to the building, curious about whether she might be one of the veterans he was here to help. As he approached, he could see her more clearly. She was Hispanic, probably in her mid-20s, wearing a military surplus jacket that suggested she might have served. Her dark hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and she was focused intently on the documents in her hands. General Mitchell had developed an ability over the years to spot veterans in civilian settings. Something about military bearing never completely disappeared, even years after discharge. This young woman had it. A straightness to her posture despite her obvious fatigue, an alertness to her surroundings even while reading. He was about 20 feet away when she looked up from her papers to check the bus schedule posted at the stop. That's when General Mitchell saw the left side of her face. The scars were extensive and clearly from severe burns. They covered her temple, cheek, and jaw in a pattern that immediately told him a story. These weren't accident burns from a house fire or car crash. The distribution and severity were consistent with combat injuries from an explosion or fire in a confined space. General Mitchell stopped walking. His mind began racing through possibilities. The scars, the military jacket, the age, the location near a government office where veteran services were provided. This could be Rodriguez, Maya, the file he had just been reviewing. But it was more than that. Something about the specific pattern of her scars was triggering a memory he couldn't quite grasp. He had seen burns like these before, in a very specific context. But the details were fuzzy. The young woman noticed him staring and instinctively turned her head to hide the scarred side of her face. It was a practiced movement that spoke of 3 years of dealing with unwanted attention. General Mitchell realized he was being rude and started to look away, but something stopped him. The memory was becoming clearer now. Burns in that pattern, on a young female soldier, from a forward medical station. He had read a report about this case, had even recommended someone for a medal. But the name in that report had been Sergeant Rodriguez. General Mitchell's eyes widened as the pieces fell into place. He looked at the papers in the woman's hands and could make out the official government letterhead. His suspicion was growing stronger by the minute. Maya noticed the military officer staring at her and felt the familiar mixture of discomfort and resignation. Here was another person who was going to judge her based on her appearance. At least this one had the excuse of being military. Maybe he was trying to figure out if her scars were combat-related. She considered moving to a different seat on the bench, but she was tired and the bus should be arriving soon. Instead, she turned her body slightly to give him a less direct view of her scars and continued reading her paperwork. General Mitchell realized he needed to approach this situation carefully. If this was indeed Maya Rodriguez from the file he had been reviewing, she was a hero who had been failed by the system he was responsible for overseeing. But he couldn't just walk up to a stranger and ask if she was a veteran. That would be intrusive and potentially traumatic. Instead, he decided to walk past the bus stop and see if he could get a better sense of the situation. As he moved closer, he could see that the papers in her hands were definitely government documents related to disability benefits. The letterhead was unmistakable. When he was about 10 feet away, a gust of wind caught the papers in Maya's hands. One sheet flew toward him, and he instinctively reached out to catch it before it blew into traffic. As he handed it back to her, he could see her name clearly printed at the top. Rodriguez, Maya Elena. "Thank you," Maya said quietly, accepting the paper back without making eye contact. General Mitchell's heart was pounding now. This was definitely the Rodriguez from the file. The young woman whose benefit claim had been delayed for 8 months. The soldier whose case he had flagged for personal review. But more than that, the memories were flooding back now with crystal clarity. 3 years ago, he had been deployed as a brigadier general overseeing medical operations in that region. He had personally read the after-action reports from the attack on Forward Operating Base Delta. The reports had described an act of extraordinary heroism by a young medic who had saved 3 lives despite sustaining severe injuries herself. The medic had run into a burning medical tent to rescue wounded soldiers, ultimately using her own body to create an escape route for a trapped 19-year-old private. That medic had been Sergeant Maya Rodriguez. General Mitchell remembered now that he had personally recommended her for the Silver Star Medal for her actions that day. He had been moved by the reports of her courage and sacrifice. The recommendation had been approved, but by the time the paperwork was processed, Sergeant Rodriguez had been discharged and was recovering from her injuries. He had meant to follow up on the case to ensure she received proper recognition and support, but other urgent matters had taken priority. Now, 3 years later, he was face to face with a woman who had risked everything to save her fellow soldiers and was sitting at a bus stop after fighting for months to get the basic benefits she deserved. Maya was preparing to stand up as she saw a bus approaching in the distance. She wanted to be ready to board quickly and avoid any further interaction with the staring general. "Excuse me," General Mitchell said, his voice careful and respectful. "I apologize for bothering you, but are you by any chance Maya Rodriguez?" Maya froze. Very few people knew her full name, and certainly no random military officers should recognize her. Her first instinct was to deny it and walk away, but something about his tone made her look at him more carefully. The general was older, probably in his late 50s, with graying hair and kind eyes. His uniform was perfectly pressed and displayed numerous ribbons and medals. Most importantly, he didn't look at her scars with disgust or curiosity. His expression was something else entirely. Why are you asking?" Maya said cautiously. General Mitchell took a step back to give her more space, recognizing that she was uncomfortable. "My name is General Thomas Mitchell. I believe I know about your service record, and if you're who I think you are, I owe you both an apology and my deepest gratitude." Maya was completely confused now. She had never heard this man's name before, and she couldn't imagine what he might owe her an apology for. "I'm sorry, but I don't understand." The bus was getting closer, and Maya was torn between her desire to escape this awkward situation and her curiosity about what this general was talking about. General Mitchell realized he needed to be direct but gentle. "3 years ago, you were serving as a medic at Forward Operating Base Delta. There was an attack with rocket-propelled grenades, and you saved 3 soldiers from a burning medical tent. You were severely injured in the process." Maya's mouth fell open. How could this stranger know those details? The incident reports had been classified, and very few people outside of her immediate chain of command had access to the specifics. "How do you know about that?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Because I was the general in charge of medical operations for that region," General Mitchell replied. "I read every after-action report from that attack. I personally recommended you for the Silver Star for your actions that day." Maya felt like the ground was shifting beneath her feet. She had never heard anything about a medal recommendation. When she was discharged, there had been no mention of special recognition for her actions. She had assumed that saving her fellow soldiers was simply what anyone would have done in her situation. "I don't understand," she said again. "I never received any medal. I was just doing my job." General Mitchell felt a wave of anger, not at Maya, but at the system that had failed her so completely. Not only had her benefits been delayed for 8 months, but apparently the medal he had recommended had never reached her either. "Miss Rodriguez," he said formally, "what you did that day went far beyond just doing your job. You risked your life to save 3 soldiers who couldn't save themselves. Private Danny Morrison wrote a letter describing how you positioned yourself under burning debris to create an escape route for him. You saved his life at the cost of your own physical well-being." Maya's eyes filled with tears. Nobody had ever described her actions in those terms before. In her mind, she had simply done what needed to be done. She had never thought of herself as particularly heroic. "Danny's alive?" she asked. That was the question that had haunted her for 3 years. She knew she had gotten him out of the tent, but his condition had been serious, and she had been too injured to follow up on his recovery. "Very much alive," General Mitchell confirmed. "He completed his recovery and was eventually promoted to sergeant. He's currently stationed in Germany, and he talks about you regularly. You're the reason he was able to go home to his family." The bus had arrived at the stop, but neither Maya nor General Mitchell moved toward it. Other passengers boarded while they stood talking, both of them oblivious to everything except their conversation. Maya was struggling to process this information. For 3 years, she had carried the weight of her scars and the challenges they brought to her daily life. She had endured stares and whispers and assumptions about her character. Through it all, she had tried to maintain her dignity and her sense of self-worth, but it had been difficult. Now this general was telling her that her actions had been officially recognized as heroic, that the pain she had endured had saved not just 1 life, but 3 lives, that there were people who talked about her with gratitude and respect. "I need to apologize to you," General Mitchell continued. "The system failed you in multiple ways. Your medal recommendation should have been processed before your discharge, not lost in bureaucratic delays. Your disability benefits should have been approved immediately, not 8 months later. You served with honor and sacrifice, and you deserved better from the institution you served." Maya didn't know what to say. Part of her was angry about the failures he was describing, but mostly she felt a profound sense of relief. For the first time in 3 years, someone in authority was acknowledging what she had been through and treating her with the respect she had earned. "There's something else," General Mitchell said. I'm here today specifically to review problematic veteran benefit cases. Yours was at the top of my list. I came here to investigate why your claim had been delayed so long and to ensure it was resolved immediately. Maya looked down at the paperwork in her hands. I just finished at the benefits office. They said everything is approved now and payments will start next month. That's a start, General Mitchell said, but it's not enough. You should have been receiving these benefits 2.5 years ago. You should have received your Silver Star Medal 3 years ago. You should never have had to struggle with employment or medical bills or any of the other challenges you've faced because of your service-connected injuries. The general paused and looked directly at Maya's scars. Unlike everyone else who had stared at them that day, his gaze held no judgment or disgust. Instead, she saw respect and recognition. Those scars represent courage and sacrifice, he said quietly. Anyone who looks at them and sees anything else is wrong. Maya felt tears rolling down her cheeks now. After 3 years of having her scars be a source of shame and social difficulty, hearing them described as symbols of courage was overwhelming. Another bus arrived at the stop. Maya realized she had missed her original bus and would need to catch this one if she wanted to get home before dark. I should go, she said, but she made no move toward the bus. General Mitchell reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a business card. Miss Rodriguez, I would like to arrange a proper ceremony to present you with your Silver Star Medal. You earned it 3 years ago, and you deserve to receive it with full honors. Would you be willing to accept that? Maya took the card with shaking hands. The idea of receiving official recognition for her actions seemed surreal after all this time. Also, the general continued, I want to personally review your entire case to ensure you receive full compensation for the delays you've experienced. The system owes you more than just going forward benefits. It owes you back payment and an acknowledgement of how badly you were treated. The bus driver was honking now, indicating that he was ready to leave. Maya looked at the bus, then back at General Mitchell. I don't know what to say, she admitted. Say you'll call my office tomorrow, General Mitchell replied. Say you'll let us make this right. Maya nodded, clutching the business card tightly. She hurried onto the bus just before it pulled away, finding a seat by the window. As the bus drove off, she could see General Mitchell still standing at the bus stop watching her leave. For the first time in 3 years, Maya felt something she had almost forgotten. Pride in her service and in the choices she had made that terrible day at Forward Operating Base Delta. Maya stared at General Mitchell's business card for most of the evening, turning it over in her hands as if it might disappear if she looked away too long. The simple white card with embossed military insignia seemed to represent possibilities she had never dared to imagine. She lived in a small one-bedroom apartment on the 3rd floor of an old building downtown. The rent was affordable, which was important given her limited income, but the stairs were challenging on days when her left arm ached from the old injuries. Tonight, however, she barely noticed the climb. Her small living room contained just the basics. A second-hand couch, a coffee table she had found at a thrift store, and a television that was older than she was. On the wall hung a single framed photograph from her Army days, taken before her deployment. In the picture, she was smiling in her dress uniform, young and confident and unmarked by war. Maya set the business card on the coffee table next to the photograph and tried to process everything that had happened. That morning, she had been just another scarred veteran struggling with bureaucracy and social stigma. Tonight, she was apparently a decorated hero who had been failed by the very system she had served. She thought about calling her mother, but decided to wait until she knew more about what General Mitchell was proposing. Her family had supported her through the long recovery process, but they had also witnessed her struggles with civilian life. Maya didn't want to raise their hopes about positive changes if nothing substantial came of this encounter. Instead, she made herself a simple dinner and spent the evening researching General Mitchell online. His military record was impressive. He had served in multiple deployments and had earned a reputation for advocating for wounded veterans. Several articles mentioned his efforts to reform the disability benefits system and his work to ensure that combat heroes received proper recognition. The more Maya read, the more credible his promises seemed. This wasn't some random officer trying to make himself feel better. This was someone with both the authority and the track record to actually make changes happen. The next morning, Maya called the number on the business card at exactly 9 o'clock. She had rehearsed what she wanted to say, but her hands were still shaking as she dialed. "General Mitchell's office, this is Colonel Davis speaking," answered a crisp, professional voice. "Hello, this is Maya Rodriguez. General Mitchell asked me to call about a medal ceremony?" Maya's voice trailed off uncertainly. "Miss Rodriguez, yes, the general has been expecting your call. Please hold while I transfer you to him directly." Maya was surprised to be put through immediately. She had expected to leave a message or be scheduled for a callback. "Miss Rodriguez, thank you for calling." General Mitchell's voice was warm and familiar. "I hope you've had time to think about our conversation yesterday." "I have, and I'm interested in learning more about what you proposed," Maya replied, feeling more confident now. "Excellent. First, I want you to know that I've already initiated a full review of your case. My staff spent yesterday evening going through every document related to your service record and your disability claim. What we found is frankly unacceptable." Maya waited, unsure of what to expect. General Mitchell continued, "Not only was your Silver Star recommendation buried in paperwork for 3 years, but you were also entitled to additional combat pay that was never processed. Between the delayed benefits and the missed payments, the government owes you approximately $47,000. Maya nearly dropped the phone. $47,000 was more money than she had ever imagined having at one time. It would eliminate her medical debt and give her the financial stability to make real choices about her future. "Furthermore," the general said, "I want to arrange for your medal ceremony to take place at the state capitol, with full military honors. You deserve public recognition for your service, and frankly, the Army needs to acknowledge how badly we handled your case." "That sounds incredible," Maya said. "But I have to ask, why are you doing all this for me specifically? There must be hundreds of veterans with similar problems." General Mitchell was quiet for a moment before answering. "You're right that there are many veterans who have been failed by the system. But Miss Rodriguez, what you did at Forward Operating Base Delta represents the very best of military service. You embody the values that every soldier aspires to live up to. When someone like you is treated poorly by the institution they served with such honor, it reflects badly on all of us." He paused before continuing. "Also, I have to admit this has become personal for me. I recommended you for that medal 3 years ago because I was genuinely moved by your actions. The fact that you never received it, that you've been struggling alone all this time, represents a failure on my part as a leader. I should have followed up. I should have ensured you were taken care of." Maya felt tears forming in her eyes again. The idea that someone in authority cared enough to feel personally responsible for her well-being was overwhelming. "When would you like to schedule the ceremony?" she asked. "How does 3 weeks from today sound? That will give us time to arrange everything properly and to notify some special guests who should be there." "Special guests?" "Well, Private Morrison, Sergeant Morrison now, is flying in from Germany specifically for your ceremony. The other 2 soldiers you saved, Martinez and Thompson, will also be attending. They've all requested permission to be there when you receive your medal." Maya had to sit down. The 3 soldiers she had saved wanted to attend her ceremony. For 3 years, she had wondered if they even remembered her, if her actions had made any real difference in their lives. Now she was learning that they not only remembered, but that they considered her important enough to travel across the country to honor. "I would be honored to see them again," Maya said, her voice thick with emotion. "There's one more thing," General Mitchell said. "The ceremony will likely attract media attention. Your story represents something important about military service and sacrifice, and I believe sharing it publicly could help other veterans who are facing similar struggles. However, I want to be clear that media participation is entirely your choice. You can receive your medal privately if you prefer." Maya thought about this carefully. For 3 years, her scars had made her want to hide from public attention. But General Mitchell's words the day before had started to change her perspective. Maybe her scars didn't have to be a source of shame. Maybe they could represent something positive. "I think I would like to do the media interviews," she said. "If sharing my story might help other veterans, then I want to do that." "I think that's a brave decision," General Mitchell replied. "I'll have my staff coordinate everything and send you the details. Miss Rodriguez, I want you to know that working on your case has reminded me why I became a soldier in the first place. Thank you for your service, and thank you for your patience with our bureaucracy." After hanging up, Maya sat in her small apartment trying to absorb everything that was happening. 3 weeks from now, she would be receiving a Silver Star Medal in a public ceremony attended by the soldiers she had saved. She would have enough money to pay off her debts and start planning for a more secure future. Most importantly, she would finally have official recognition that her sacrifice had meant something. The 3 weeks passed quickly as Maya prepared for the ceremony. General Mitchell's staff arranged for her to meet with a military protocol officer who explained exactly what would happen during the event. She also spoke with a public affairs specialist who helped her prepare for media interviews. Most meaningful of all, she had long phone conversations with Danny Morrison, Carlos Martinez, and Robert Thompson, the 3 soldiers she had saved. Each of them told her how her actions had affected their lives. Danny had been able to return home to his wife and new daughter. Carlos had recovered from his injuries and was now working as a paramedic, inspired by the medical care he had received that day. Robert had struggled with survivor's guilt until he learned about Maya's condition, after which he dedicated himself to veteran advocacy work. All 3 men expressed their gratitude not just for saving their lives, but for showing them what true courage looked like under pressure. They told her that thinking about her example had helped them through difficult moments in their own lives. The day of the ceremony arrived clear and cold. Maya wore her dress uniform for the first time in 3 years, with the ribbons she had earned before her injury displayed across her chest. Looking at herself in the mirror, she was surprised to realize that the scars on her face no longer dominated her appearance in her own eyes. Instead, she saw a soldier who had served with honor. The ceremony took place on the steps of the state capitol building, with several hundred people in attendance. Maya's family sat in the front row, beaming with pride. General Mitchell served as the presiding officer, and the state's senior senator gave a speech about heroism and sacrifice. When the moment came for Maya to receive her medal, Danny, Carlos, and Robert joined her on the platform. General Mitchell read the citation describing her actions on that day 3 years ago, his voice carrying clearly across the crowd. "For gallantry in action against an enemy of the United States, while serving as a medic with the 115th Medical Company during combat operations. Sergeant Rodriguez distinguished herself by acts of gallantry and intrepidity above and beyond the call of duty while under enemy fire. Her heroic actions resulted in the saving of 3 lives while sustaining severe injuries herself. Sergeant Rodriguez's gallant actions and dedicated devotion to duty, without regard for her own life, were in keeping with the highest traditions of military service and reflect great credit upon herself, her unit, and the United States Army." As General Mitchell pinned the silver star on Maya's uniform, the crowd erupted in sustained applause. Maya looked out at the faces before her and saw respect, admiration, and gratitude instead of the pity or disgust she had grown accustomed to. After the ceremony, Maya spoke with local reporters about her experience. For the first time, she was able to tell her story on her own terms. She talked about the importance of supporting wounded veterans and the need for better systems to ensure that heroes didn't fall through bureaucratic cracks. One reporter asked her if she regretted the choice she had made that day, given the long-term consequences for her own life. Maya didn't hesitate in her response. "I've never regretted saving my fellow soldiers," she said. "What I regret is how long it took for our system to recognize that wounded veterans deserve better care and support. My scars represent the day I was able to make a difference when it mattered most. I'm proud of them." The story of Maya's ceremony aired on national news that evening and was picked up by major newspapers across the country. Within days, Maya was receiving letters from veterans around the country who had been inspired by her story. Some shared their own struggles with bureaucracy and stigma, while others thanked her for showing them that their service-connected disabilities could be sources of pride rather than shame. General Mitchell used the attention surrounding Maya's case to advocate for broader reforms to the veteran benefits system. He testified before congressional committees about the need for faster processing of claims and better support for wounded warriors transitioning to civilian life. For Maya herself, the recognition brought opportunities she had never expected. She was offered a position with a non-profit organization that advocated for veterans' rights, using her experience and newfound public profile to help other veterans navigate the system she had struggled with for so long. The financial compensation she received allowed her to move to a better apartment and to pursue additional medical treatments that improved her mobility and reduced her chronic pain. More importantly, she was able to pursue education and training that positioned her for a meaningful career helping others. 6 months after the ceremony, Maya received a letter from a young veteran who had seen her story on television. The woman wrote about how she had been hiding her own combat-related scars and avoiding social situations because of the way people reacted to her appearance. Seeing Maya speak with confidence about her injuries had inspired the woman to seek help and to stop viewing her scars as shameful. Maya kept that letter on her desk as a reminder of why her public recognition had been important. Her individual story had become something larger, a symbol of resilience and an example of how society should treat those who had sacrificed for their country. A year after receiving her Silver Star, Maya was invited to speak at military medical training programs, sharing her story with young medics who might someday face similar choices. She emphasized that heroism wasn't about being fearless, but about acting with courage, despite fear when others needed help. In these speeches, Maya would often touch the scars on her face as she spoke, no longer hiding them but presenting them as visible proof of the values she had lived by in her moment of testing. The young medics would listen intently, understanding that they were hearing from someone who had faced the ultimate test of military service and had chosen honor over personal safety. Maya's relationship with her scars continued to evolve as she embraced her role as a public advocate for veterans. They remained a daily reminder of the worst day of her life, but they had also become symbols of the best choice she had ever made. When children pointed at her in public now, their parents would sometimes recognize her from news stories and take the opportunity to explain concepts of service and sacrifice. The transformation in how Maya was perceived by strangers was dramatic. Instead of assumptions about drug labs or criminal activity, people increasingly recognized her as a decorated veteran who had sacrificed for her country. Store clerks who had once been uncomfortable around her now thanked her for her service. More importantly, Maya's own perception of herself had fundamentally changed. She no longer saw herself as damaged or diminished by her injuries. Instead, she understood that her scars marked her as someone who had been tested under extreme circumstances and had chosen to act with courage and compassion. On quiet evenings in her new apartment, Maya would sometimes look at the photograph of her younger self in dress uniform and think about the journey from that hopeful young soldier to the decorated veteran she had become. The path had included more pain and struggle than she could have imagined, but it had also revealed strengths she never knew she possessed. Danny Morrison visited her during a leave from his assignment in Germany, bringing pictures of his daughter and stories of his continued military service. He told Maya that he thought of her every time he faced a difficult decision, asking himself what she would do in his situation. "You saved more than my life that day," he told her. "You showed me what it means to put others first, even when it costs you everything. That lesson has shaped every choice I've made since then." Maya realized that her actions on that terrible day 3 years ago had created ripples that extended far beyond the immediate moment. The 3 soldiers she had saved had gone on to save others in their own ways, carrying forward the example of selfless service she had demonstrated. As Maya looked toward her future, she felt a sense of purpose and direction that had been missing during her years of struggle. Her scars would always be with her, and there would always be people who looked at them with discomfort or judgment. But now she also knew there would be people who looked at them with respect and gratitude, understanding what they truly represented. General Mitchell had been right when he told her that her scars represented courage and sacrifice. It had taken Maya 3 years and an encounter with a stranger at a bus stop to fully understand that truth herself. Now she was determined to spend the rest of her life helping other wounded veterans discover their own worth and find their own paths to recognition and healing. Maya Rodriguez had gone from being someone who tried to hide her scars to someone who wore them as badges of honor, understanding finally that the worst day of her life had also been the day she became a hero.